Hola, bienvenidos a un nuevo video. Hoy en nuestro canal tenemos entrevista con Steve Schlesinger. Él es el Fixed Wing Segment Manager de FairSky. Es digámoslo así, la cara más conocida de FairSky. Es el director del segmento de alas fijas. Para algunos de los que son usuarios de FairSky y consultan mucho en redes acerca de FairSky, él es FairSky Steve y es de las personas que más colabora con el tema de programación y también con muchas de las inquietudes en el manejo de equipos de FairSky. Hoy tendremos esta entrevista, espero sea de su agrado. Steve, welcome to my channel. I told to my viewers in Spanish about you. Steve is the fixed wing segment manager. It's very known in social networks like FR Sky Steve. It's a great person, help to all the people, to experts and beginners. I saw that in social networks with questions and some technical stuff about the first sky. Steve, it's a pleasure to get you in an interview with you.
Mucho gusto. Thank you very much for having me.
Steve, it's a
As
pleasure.
my people say, ¿Qué onda? What's going on?
¿Qué onda? What's going on? Here in Colombia says parcero.
Okay.
Normally, okay. Steve, could you tell us about the history about the first sky?
The history of the company?
Yep.
Okay. So essentially, the company started in 2010.
Mm-hmm.
So it's only about 14 years old. Not really a super old company,
Yeah.
but what it was somebody decided that he went to college and got really well educated on radio technology. And then he started looking around, looking at two-way transmitters for RC planes.
Mm-hmm.
And then he figured out what the leading ones were in the market, how they made them. And then he decided to make them a little bit better. So that first one he came out with was called ACCST. It was an 8 channel, they called it D8 back then. And what it was a module that went back on of some of the more popular radios. So like the Spectrums and the JRs and some of the Fatabas. They fit in the back, and then you could use the receivers as well from FreeSky. So you had a transmit model and receiver. And the first order that the company got was from Hobby King. It was a huge order. And their teenage son sat there and watched mom and dad solder up all the receivers for this
Mm-hmm.
huge order every single night on their kitchen table. And the son is now my manager, and mom and dad are doing pretty well, but they live in Wuxi, China some of the year, and they live in Irvine, California some of the year as well.
Mm-hmm.
So from that, we were like, we were around, but when the drone market took off, I mean, there was essentially two things. You needed S-Bus in order to work with everything. And so S-Bus was there are two options. There's one from Futaba, which was really expensive, and there's one from FreeSky, which was fairly inexpensive. So everyone opted for FreeSky. So overnight, the company became a huge smashing hit, and it took off. And it was doing well until about 2019, 2020. The problem they ran into was that we were open source at the time. I know you're going to ask about this later about OpenTX and things like that. And unfortunately, for the fixed wing market, we kind of drifted away from them, is so to say, from the fixed wing market. And we wanted to get back into it. We wanted to have a closed source protocol. It's taken about 5 years, but that's what eventually became Tandem. And then we moved on from that to Twin as well. So that's kind of in a nutshell where we're at. It's this whole thing with Ethos, the operating system for the transmitters, is taking us a while to get it fully baked, but we're getting very close to the end of the whole process here, where it's kind of where this is what we meant to bring out. And then from this point on, we're just going to keep updating the transmitter, the operating systems and stuff like that. But as far as the radios are concerned, pretty much by the end of this year, what you see from FreeSky for fixed wing is what we're going to have probably for the next 2 or 3 years.
Yeah. About the operation system, I know. I got some experience with OpenTX and Edge, and what's a little bit harder for me, but Ethos, wow, it's kind of is another word. It's more easier for the people, and for me, it was a hit. So
Yeah, that's what we're hoping for. Is it's the same guy who developed OpenTX, or one of the primary developers working on Ethos, and we want it to be friendly as a touch, like a smartphone. You know,
mhm,
the whole idea of a touch
yeah,
base. That was what we were looking for, and trying to bring the experience. Realistically, what we're trying to do is bring the experience to more people. So the thing about OpenTX was that those were for that was for the brainiacs, so the
yeah,
people who really wanted to spend the time and dig in, and it was very powerful for the very limited technology
mhm,
that we had back then. The technology in these new batches of FrSky transmitters, the X20, the X18, all the tandem, all the twin transmitters, those have the most state-of-the-art microcontrollers, which other manufacturers haven't even begun to work with yet.
yeah. Yeah, I know because when a first guy changed to Ethos, I see the change of designs, change of the radio transmitter, and it's a completely different. The technology, it's too much technology with Ethos. You can see much features than the last operation system than Ethos.
Yeah, the thing we look at too is that the market is, when you think about the fixed wing market, there are people, it's like this big. And
Mm-hmm.
before we were only focused on this segment of the market, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just the top 10% people who can really want to spend the time to understand a complex radio operating system. But now we're trying to open up to more of the market. So the idea is we need the technology to work with people for it to be easier to work with. And that's what you're finding right now. And we're starting to see that also with things like stabilized receivers, where at one point there were so many issues with it. You had to download Lua scripts, and how do you
Yeah.
do that? And then we have a fix for that now. And then there was something else about the stabilized receivers. Oh yeah, the channel order was really difficult, putting
Mm-hmm.
that into transmitter. And now when you in Ethos 1.5, when you put the channel, we'll ask you, we can create a
Yeah.
model in the model wizard. Would you like to make the stabilized receiver? Which one? And it will set up the channels for you.
Yeah. It's much easier than the last edition. Yeah, that's correct. Okay,
Yeah,
Steve. Another question. At my
sure.
country, and especially in Latin America, people not now the dual band 2.4 and 900 megahertz. The advantage of that band. This week, especially in some groups, says that's only a tendency or only marketing stuff.
Mhm.
But I got the opportunity to be in events in other countries. I'm a judge from IMAC events,
Nice.
and and I was last year in Mexico and talking with some pilots and says that in some flying fields got a serious problem with the frequency, especially with the 2.4. So and here in Colombia, some places got that kind of problems, and that's the solution, the dual band. And the first Sky was the real solution, especially for a country. Could you tell us more about the advantage about that technology, about the, the tandem technology versus the other technologies that try to approach to tandem?
Right. So right now, the tandem technology is the only one that we know of where you have essentially two receivers built into one receiver.
Mm-hmm.
So you have the 2.4 gigahertz receiver, and that one is nice because everyone could be on there. Everyone could fly 2.4 gigahertz, and that's kind of the preferred way to fly. But what happens is 2.4 is not perfect, and when you start flying and you turn, then the actual antennas go point to the sky and to the ground. So what happens is when you make that turn, 2.4 gigahertz is at its weakest point.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes you'll need a few seconds to save you. So at the same time, we're flying 2.4 gigahertz, you're flying with 900 megahertz. And it's when the transmitters start to recognize that the amount of packets or frames coming from
Yeah.
the 2.4 gigahertz starting to fall to a point where it falls below a certain threshold, which means it's not sending enough frames to keep the flight going. It will fill in the missing frames with the 900 megahertz.
Mhm.
And that's how it works. And sometimes you're only on 900 megahertz for a few seconds, but that's all it takes just to save your plane.
Okay, that's that's good. Okay, Eversky got the best overall price compared with other brands,
Yeah.
and helps with the economy in countries like Latin America. People here in Latin America normally are traditional brands, use traditional brands like a Futaba, Spectrum, JR, Yeti. But the first impression normally from the brand, the radio is good. Um, I fly during 35 years Futaba. So, and 10 years ago, flying Spectrum. But this year, I switched to a First Sky.
Oh, great.
And the first step, is hard. It's hard to know. Oh, let's try. But really, uh, really, I like too much that change. My first thought about is why I don't change tandem before. It's amazing radio. It's really easy to program, and you don't know you know it's amazing product, and I recommend too much that the product. The First Sky radios are amazing. It's for me
Huh.
it's amazing. And and but like but taking again, so much people thinks, yeah, it's a cheaper, it's cheaper radio. But when I show that people what that radio can do, wow, it's other words, and says, wow, too much technology, the price is good. But normally people thinks, well, when see the radio, it change his mind. Is not easy, but change his mind when see how the radio works. And that's a it's a very good thing about the First Sky. The first impression of the people is, it's a cheaper radio, but it's not it's a good radio for us, like a Latin American, and maybe in other countries, maybe in Europe, and in some places got the same economic problems. I don't know, but it's a good thing about the First Sky that.
Oh, yeah. So the the radios, the technology has always been affordable from Free Sky.
Mm-hmm,
And a lot of people, there's some people who shy away from it because they think, that if I spend more, I'm gonna get better quality
mm-hmm.
hardware. And we're starting to find out now that there's just the more expensive hardware out there isn't necessarily
It's not
as
necessary.
better. It's not even as good. Sometimes you're paying more for less.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've been on the Free Sky. Thank you for joining us at the Free Sky bandwagon. I jumped on back in 2017, 2018 timeframe,
Mm-hmm.
somewhere around there. And so, yeah, I enjoyed the inexpensive receivers, that allows me to keep the hobby inexpensive. When I started flying with Free Sky, I started flying FPV, and
Mm-hmm.
this we go out, to the coast and you fly, and I'm flying a mile or two away, and I'm thinking to myself, I could still have control of my plane, and I'm a mile or two away, and my gosh, if this plane goes down, I'll never see it again
Mm-hmm.
because if it crashes, someone's going to pick it up and take it home to their kids. You know, here's a plane for you.
Uh-huh.
Um, so I've had to have an enormous amount of faith in Free Sky, and it's the thing is that over the years I've tested it, and that was the other thing when I started looking at the company. What I started noticing is that they kind of really like to have problems as far as, I mean, they don't like problems, but they excel at solving problems. So when we had issues, I mean, back when I first started, 900 megahertz wasn't working very well for FreeSky. And they kept at it and they kept at it and they kept at it until they finally got it right. And
Mhm.
so that is now it is actually what you get. The 900 megahertz that comes with the tandem receivers is actually much better than the 900 megahertz you got from back in 2019. It's really improved. It's a lot more energy efficient. It's a lot more powerful. You can go a lot further with it. So all along, it's very good. Oh, I was going to also mention, you brought up the whole idea about people having signal loss. I'm sorry, I didn't get to this point on the last one where you're at an event and, um, the worst thing in the world is to feel like your plane is, you don't have control of your plane. And to watch your plane come down, like I don't have it, and then you're just
Mhm.
watching it spiral to the ground or whatever it does. And it hurts. And then it's worse because you're in front of all your friends as it happens, right? So
Yeah.
what we're discovering is that you're asking about it. Do we have this issue in places like the United States and everywhere else? And the answer is yes. There's a lot more things out in the field that communicate with each other. So
Mhm.
I was out in the middle of nowhere in Fresno. I mean, this was nowhere. And there was a problem at the field we were flying at because there was live cattle like sheep. And
Mhm.
what they did is they sent out a signal from somewhere to where the water would open and close. So they had a solenoid valve which would open and close and give the sheep water.
Mhm.
And so what would happen is that signal would blast. And what I always say is that when you're listening to AM radio, this is the best example. You're driving through town and you're listening to a baseball game. Is
Mhm.
baseball big in Colombia? I think it is. You have a lot of Colombian
A
base.
little bit more the soccer.
Some so big. Okay, how about a football?
Yeah,
As
football, soccer.
football, soccer, yeah. So that you listen to a football, soccer game, and then all of a sudden you go by an antenna, and then you're hearing ranchero music for a few seconds,
Mhm.
and then you're all of a sudden it goes away, and you're back to the game. That's called signal swamping,
Mhm.
where something is overtaken, has put out such a big broad signal that you're listening to it. And that's the problem. I mean, when essentially same thing happens with the radio transmitter. Something's out there, puts out a big blast, and then
Mhm.
all of a sudden you don't have control of your plane anymore. So in that moment in time, even if it lasts for a few seconds, it jumps over to 900 megahertz. And then the answer to the other question, yeah, the world economy unfortunately isn't doing so great. Europe is really starting to really struggle in this world economy in particular. And so it's kind of, I don't know, here in the United States, it's an interesting time because there was a time maybe 5, 6 years ago when the
Mhm.
economy was going gangbusters here, and people were making, double digits on their portfolios.
Yeah.
So when someone picks up, and $100,000 on their stock investments in a matter of 3 or 6 months,
Mhm.
spending $5,000 on a new transmitter is not a big deal. And
Yeah.
I'm going to spend that much. But now
Mhm.
everyone, I think, is like looking at what they're spending. And you're flying planes, the IMAC planes, some of those get to be quite large. And the
Mhm.
turbine jets now, in particular, a lot of these guys, there's something called sports jets, and these things are 2 meters, and
Mhm.
they're very, I don't know, they're really nice little planes. They're very popular. I mean, I probably would say that's about 60% of what I see out there. These little sports jets, they're fun to fly, they're fast, fairly inexpensive to put together. Now people are starting to look at, by the time they get done putting in their power box and their whatever receivers, they're up to $1,000. And then they could do the same thing with the TDSR-18, which will put out more than enough power for their servos. So people are saying $1,000 versus $150. And that's why we're starting to get people who already have other radio brands, more expensive radio brands, come to us because they're starting to realize like I build a plane, I sell it off, and buy another plane. Pretty soon, this is my own money I'm talking about. I'm taking a hit on all the stuff, anyways. And yeah, it's the free sky is becoming more popular and it's becoming a lot more acceptable across the world right now, which is a great thing to see.
Yeah, it's a great. Steve, Sky users grow day by day, right? I know that you was 1 week ago, 2 weeks ago at Jets over Kentucky event, right?
Right.
What was your comments about the event, especially about the number of FR Sky users compared with the last year edition?
So the thing about Jets over Kentucky was this year I was like, oh man, do I really have to go? I mean, I'm being honest with you here. I was like, and it's going to be hot and sweltering. It's going to be horrible. I'm going to be miserable and whatever else. And I go there and the weather's delightful and all my friends are there. And it was just like 2 days of pure paradise.
Mhm.
And it was about 2.5 days, almost 3 days there. And what I started to see was I started to go around the field and I would see guys flying who I've never met before. So a lot of times people would come up and they bought a radio from sometime in the last year or so, and we helped them out. These are guys who had no idea we even were at the event. They're not really following along on Facebook. They just know about the radio system. So the turbine jet community is it's a unique community, and because here in the United States, it's both. I mean, essentially, what would happen is what when you would start off flying is they would teach you on an apprentice,
Mhm.
Horizon Hobby Apprentice, or an Aero Scout. And then what you would do is you would take a tour of all the different things Horizon Hobby offers, all the different blue boxes. So you get into all the warbirds, you get
Yeah,
into all the different things. Excuse me.
no problem.
I'm getting emotional about this, but
Yeah.
no, but seriously, what would happen now is that people, I don't know what it is. When they see an EDF jet, that's it. I mean, I would say it's like a healthy chunk of the flying community, maybe 40%.
Hmm.
Once they have their first EDF jet, the EDF jets are great because these are little electric ducted fan jets,
Yeah.
and they're buying $100 batteries. Some of these planes take two of them at a time. So to fly for 6 minutes, you need $200 worth of batteries. And so, they show up to the field like suitcases full of batteries, these guys. And so then kind of what the top of that whole market is the turbine, because
Mhm.
all those guys love turbines. Turbines are a unique thing because it is both the excitement for turbine jets is growing and the number of places you can fly turbine jets is going away. I mean, what we would do here in the United States is we would buy farmland or something way out in the middle of nowhere, just
Yeah.
kind of. I mean, and there was, I mean, when the perfect best example, the big turbine jet event is um, called Best in the West, and it's located in Buttonwillow, California. And it's like near a gully, near a bunch of farmland. You're like half an hour away from the last probably restaurant or
Hmm.
gas station or whatever. You're just in the middle of nowhere. I tell people it's the last thing you see before you get murdered is just is this place. Um, but I mean, so these are the places that we're going to traditionally. But what we're starting to see is that we have urban sprawl in the United States. So we have this field out in Hemet, California, which was the middle of nowhere, and it's still in the middle of farm fields. But now one segment of one of the nearby pieces parcels of land, they're saying we're developing this for housing. So all of a sudden, Hemet's just kind of like way out there, and now it's going to have housing buddy up against it. So you see a lot of this. A lot of flying fields won't let turbine jets onto their field simply because they are explosive when they crash, and just for a variety of reasons. So it is these guys who are into the hobby are way into the hobby. They get in their, they have like the big 4x4 trucks, and they haul a trailer, and they'll go,
Mhm.
3 states over to go flying with their buddies, and they all know each other. So, you talk to somebody and you mention someone who lives 4 states away, and you're like, oh, I know that guy. Yeah, I know Larry. Yeah, everyone knows each other. It's a very friendly community. So it's great. But to see Free Sky, there's 2 segments that I really focus on as far as if we can get this right, they are huge. So the number one segment is the turbine market. That
Mhm.
is, if we can really make a presence in the turbine, that's great. Number two is gliders, believe it or
Yeah.
not, because that is the most. It's actually when we talk about the fastest planes in the world,
Mhm.
your turbine jets can do about 250 miles an hour,
Mhm.
and these gliders do over 500 miles an hour
Mhm.
when they do dynamic soaring.
Aerodynamic soaring. Uh-huh.
Yeah, so they have that. And then there's precision, like your IMAC events, where that's great too. So there's a lot of these really unique, very different segments that we're growing in. But every single one of them, and then that's the kind of the thing I've been looking at. There's in the glider community, it's like they have events I haven't been to yet. They have GPS gliders. I'm not exactly sure how these things work, and they have about probably 8 or 10 very unique segments. And I would imagine that maybe I think IMAC is pretty much this is how you're going to do the call outs, and you need to fly in this certain
Mhm.
way. It's about precision, and it's about timing and everything else. Um, so it's nice to be able to grow in all these different segments, and also the hobbyists, the general hobbyists who just kind of like, we get a number of people who've come along and say to us that they've been flying such and such brand. The guys who flew Futaba, those guys in particular, I always find them to be the most interesting because they would come up to me and look at the radios, and yeah, and then they would say, well, I've been flying Futaba for the last 30 years, and it's never failed me, never done me wrong, and I'm to the day I die, I'm going to fly Futaba. But now we're starting to see those people show up, and that's been kind of a really interesting thing where I thought, wait, you're saying that the day you die, you're gonna fly for Taba, but now you have an X20S or an X20 RS or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's it.